Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, and today's guest is Kate Winkler, the CEO of Ruby. Hi, Kate.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Awesome. And I'm so excited to have you as a guest on this podcast because I am truly a fan of Ruby. I recommend it to my clients. I referred, many of my clients are using your services so our listeners know what your services are. So you provide virtual reception and chat and answering service, right?
Correct. And predominantly focused on small businesses. We're really focused on helping our small business community.
That's right. So, even before the podcast started, I gave you some examples of different clients that are using your services, such as a painting contractor who was really able to grow his business because he was using your services because he didn't have to answer the phone himself all the time. Another general contractor, an accounting company that instead of hiring a full-time receptionist is basically using your services. One of my clients who is a dentist was using your services to actually answer. Because he started a great advertising campaign, but he realized that when his receptionist is not there or when she's on the other line, there's nobody answering. So he was basically using Ruby as a backup and also somebody to answer the phone on Friday and Saturday. And we were able to really capture some leads that way. So those are some examples. So anyway, so that's why I'm so excited to talk to you because you've been in the technology sector for over 25 years. You basically had every C-level executive, CFO, COO, business development, and CEO, and now you're the CEO of Ruby. So you describe yourself as a student of businesses, right? I mean, you like to know how businesses operate and what they do. So I'm sure we're going to get amazing information and great nuggets and advice that our listeners can take and implement.
I am happy to share, and I do profess I am a big data junkie. And so I love just looking at what are the things that drive the business, what drives success, and more importantly, what our customers are providing us to really figure out how we can provide not only the best quality of service to really help capture all of those opportunities, but almost in a way to even become an insurance policy, like what's coming next that small businesses don't know about, because we're going through a really big demographic change on how people want to interact and what channels they want to interact on. So how do we even stay in front of that stuff too?
Absolutely, because now it's also chat and it's text. It's not, you have to keep current for sure, and I know you do. So that's definitely one of the topics we're going to talk about. But before we even start, tell us, how did you end up being the CEO of Ruby?
Great question. So Ruby was founded by a wonderful Portland native, Jill Nelson, who ran the business for almost 18 years. And she decided she wanted to retire. And I was fortunate enough that I actually spent a little stint of my career in technology investment banking. And I was working with businesses like Ruby that were high growth and really looking at how to ensure they had proper funding. And I met Jill about 5 years ago and got an opportunity to get to know Ruby. And I was probably during my banking career, I worked with 75 to almost 100 different companies. And I would come home and tell my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, this business in Portland is amazing because this is one of the few businesses that I've seen that really lives and breathes a purpose. And it is truly here to help small businesses. You hear the survive and thrive, but that is what Ruby has done since day one. That purpose has never changed. And how we do that has changed and evolved and gotten more broad, which is exciting. But when Jill, I had the opportunity to work with her to talk about, okay, what should Ruby's strategy be? How do we think about going from only being receptionists to being receptionists who answer calls and chats, and then maybe text messages or social media? And how do we think about expanding our profile? So I did some consulting with her, back in 2017, and she called me 2 years ago and said, I'm retiring. I said, oh my gosh, no way. And I immediately thought she was trying to just say, well, who do you know that would be a good replacement for me? So I started going through my Rolodex of, oh, maybe, no, this person's not going to be a good fit. They really won't get the purpose piece of this. And she just started laughing. She's like, I want you to do it. I'm like, Jill, I'm playing in banking now. I'm like, I haven't run a company in 6-7 years. I'm like, you don't really want me to do this. She's like, no, I really want you to do this. And I asked my husband, I said, do you remember that company in Portland? And it had been a number of years since I had worked with Ruby. And he said, Ruby, the one that you were obsessed about. He's like, you were literally obsessed about Ruby. I'm like, well, their CEO's retiring. He's like, wow, what are they going to do? And I said, I know, right? I'm like, here's the crazy thing. They think maybe me. And it was my husband that said, this is you. Like, this is the only business that I think matches your commitment to doing the right thing and always doing the right thing for the right reason and the right cause. And so I said, all right, I'll tell you what, I would love to be considered to be your replacement at Ruby. But the one thing is, having worked with so many small businesses, you should go through a process, hire a recruiter, talk to a bunch of people. And if I'm the one that comes out the other side, then it was meant to be. And we have even more conviction that this is a perfect fit. And if I'm not, then you eliminated me just being the easy choice. And because you know me. And so she did. And I went through and went through the standard interview process and ended up coming to be CEO of Ruby.
Wow. Well, I love it. First of all, because this is, the System Simplified podcast. So we talk about systems. So you actually made sure that the system, that you didn't bypass the system.
Exactly.
Exactly the right thing to do. So Where were you living at the time?
So Santa Cruz, California, which I'm still in right now because I was hired right before the pandemic started. And I just had an offer accepted on a house in Portland. I was moving my family to Portland, and right as the pandemic started. And then unfortunately, what ended up happening is I went to get an inspection on the house, and the house didn't pass inspection. So we ended up not buying the house. So I'm still in California, but interestingly enough, Ruby is still actually operating fully remote. So we don't open our offices until April 1st, and we've been closed for 2 years. So well over 2 years but that's been an interesting process to go through because security and quality and all the things that are so core to our offering, big investments had to go into place to really make sure Ruby could be Ruby, but do it in a way that also supported everyone's lifestyles of how can I work from home, and how can I support having children at home, and I'm working in a living room. And so what does that mean? And so it's been.
So you are going to go in person. You're not going to keep it virtual?
So we are going to keep it virtual at the employee's option. And so interestingly enough, what we have found is we surveyed not only all of our employees, but in particular our critical receptionists who are so good at what they do. And that core group, they really want to be at home. And the reason why is it costs money to commute. And we've actually become even more flexible, meaning we've said, if you want to not work from 7:45 to 9:30 in the morning because you have kids to drop off, and then again, and you want to split your shift into 3 shifts, that's okay. We will accommodate your schedule. So we've been able to give way more flexibility to our receptionists to actually have that personal life balance, to be able to have their children in the morning, to pick them up after school, but not actually say, okay, the rigid shifts that we have historically operated in don't work for me. So it's actually enabled us to get that flexibility, a higher quality employee that's really committed to what we do because we've been able to be flexible. So most of our receptionists will continue to work from home, and And now that we have all the infrastructure in place, you don't notice whether or not they're in a home or whether or not they're in a physical office, et cetera.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't intend, I have so many questions for you, but this is a big one because, we are shifting, obviously the podcast is going to be listened to today. It's going to be listened to 6 months from now, 2 years from now, because people go, oh yeah, I want to hear about the CEO of Ruby had to say, right? Yep. So it might be history, it might be shifting, but I think the idea of the flexibility and the ability to shift and work remotely is something that a lot of companies are struggling with and trying to make that change. It's very important. So I would love to ask you some more questions about that in terms of how do you manage? What are some of the tips you can give our listeners on how to successfully run a company? And how many employees do you have, by the way?
So we have just shy of 800 employees.
800 employees. Mm-hmm. And they were all in person pre-pandemic.
100% in person pre-pandemic. We had never worked outside of an office.
And they're all in Portland, Oregon. So in order to be a Ruby employee, you have to be in Portland, Oregon.
They used to all be in Portland, but we did build an office in Kansas City. So you had to be in Portland or Kansas City. You had to be at an office.
So that's February, March 2020, right? 800 employees and do that. Now, fast forward 2022, you've been closed, super successful still, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you continue to thrive throughout the pandemic, but now you don't have an office. And now you're going to open because some people maybe want to go back into the office.
Correct. Yeah.
But some don't, as you said. So now you're going to have this hybrid model. So obviously you made it. You were successful in being virtual. So let's go over the benefits of actually having a virtual office and the not so benefits, the cons and pros of actually being virtual as a company.
I'd love to. I will say they almost all fall on the pro side, and the things that fall on the con side are temporary, meaning, whoa, that was a lot of money in infrastructure, or that was a lot of money in process, in time to really rethink how you maintain something like culture in a virtual environment, because culture is so core to Ruby. But we've been very successful at that as well. So I'll start with the pros. And the pros really are, at the end of the day, when we all went home and we started to see there was no change in productivity. There was zero. And so, and part of this was because we already had recruiting programs in place that we hire people that really believe in what we do, that really want to help the small business. And that commitment to purpose really allowed us to stay focused on the things that matter the most. And so when we went home, that was just logistics. It didn't change purpose. And so that's why I talk a lot about the importance of purpose, because logistics are just logistics. And so as long as you don't change purpose and you have commitment to purpose, that's what we saw. We said, okay, there's no change in productivity here. And in fact, we're now seeing folks saying, you know what, this is actually better. I don't have expenses for commuting. And we immediately started doing split shifts, going, okay, we understand you have kids at home. And by the way, if a dog barks, that's okay. We're humans, we're not perfect. Humans are never perfect. And so we really just started to embrace what we saw was becoming a very positive benefit for employees. But some of the things that initially presented itself were just simple things around infrastructure, because okay, we have a computer in somebody's living room or in an attic or in a bedroom or a garage where we were having folks working. And so immediately we did do a lot of things. And this is a little bit on the con, but it's also a very positive benefit because it's just allowing our business to scale more effectively. All of the security around locking down devices and encryption and VPNs and all the things to really honor our commitment to our customers for privacy and security. So that was a big undertaking. This is one of the areas where small businesses in particular, this is where an IT services contractor, there's a lot of great tools and technologies out there that can help a small business get that same type of secure infrastructure, but not have to hire an IT person, because it really is, once you get it, it's there and it's established. And once you have defined processes, it's there and it's established. But
absolutely. So you have basically, so to summarize, so we can see the cons and the pros. So it seems like even the cons are temporary, but they become a pro, because the cons were having to invest in technology, having to figure out new systems and processes, having to figure out security. But so that's like an initial investment. But once you do that, as you said, the pros is that you can it gives you more business stability, because you can operate in any environment, and it gives you more of preparedness for the future. So that's definitely a pro. And also being able to attract employees, basically work better with employees, that's what they want as a lifestyle, and attract better employees.
It really does. And the interesting thing is being able to attract more employees. So if we take our receptionist population, so we have about 550, almost 600 receptionists. And when we look at, and we hire about 40 a month. And so, but we get thousands of resumes a month. And we look at all the resumes that they get and we say, are you looking for an in-office role in Portland or Kansas City, or are you looking for a remote role? 95% of our resumes are remote, 95%. So thousands upon thousands of people are saying, I want to work remote. So there's definitely a reality of, okay, this is a big, particularly for the hourly workforce population, this is a desire, because not only do they want to have better work-life balance, but in a lot of cases, they're looking for purpose and connectivity, and they're looking for that flexibility, because there are a lot of our population, even as our receptionists, that work 5 to 6 hours a day and not 8 to 10 hours a day, because they say, oh yeah, but by the way, because I have a creative business on the side here and I want to do both. And so we're actually embracing that flexibility and saying, it's okay to work 5 to 6 hours a day. You don't have to work 8 to 10, and you fit our purpose and you're committed to the business and you care about what we do. You are the perfect Ruby employee. And so 6 hours is fine, or 5 hours is fine, or part-time or full-time. And so it has really allowed us to attract not only a higher quality receptionist of somebody who, again, really embraces the core of who Ruby is, but we've been able to do it in more locations. So I'll give you an example. We now have over 100 employees in Texas and in Arizona. Wow. We don't have an office in either one. And there's never going to be, I can't say never, but there's not an option to say, okay, I want to start reporting to an office, because there is no office. And even in our non-reception roles, we've got employees now in 14 states. And so it's allowed us to go find people who are best fit and not convenient because of location. So it really allowed us to find employees that are just core to who Ruby is.
Wow, that's definitely a big pro. And I would say that another con would be that now that you have employees in 14 states, it's a little bit more complicated in terms of taxes and understanding the rules. But again, okay, fine. But it's something that can be overcome, because the pros definitely are outweigh the cons for sure. So now that we established what's, like why you're doing it, the key question that I have, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do, is like, how do you manage? How do you manage to keep that group, the mission? I mean, your culture is so strong, because again, as you were excited, I mean, I understand your excitement, that how you were talking about Ruby before you became the CEO of Ruby, because for some reason, I mean, it's the same for me. Like when I opened the podcast, when I first heard about Ruby, there is something contagious about that enthusiasm, because it's such the culture that was created, and it's something you don't see anywhere, honestly. Yeah. It's something that is super special. It's something that is, it's contagious. It's great in a good way. And how do you maintain that spirit? How do you maintain that culture and still be remote and not go into an office?
It is hard, and that required a lot of process change, because our culture really was built as an in-office experience. But there were disciplines of our culture. What is our vision? What is our mission? What are our core values? And we weave those throughout our day, every single day. So they're not just, you write your vision, you put it up on a shelf and it's done. And you occasionally say, just a reminder, here's our mission. They're in everything that we do. And so in everything that we do, from our full purpose is to help small businesses capture more opportunities so that they can win more business, earn repeat business, while building up their brand. And so we call all of our employees our Rubies. We talk to our Rubies very often about, there are 30 million small businesses out there and they're really struggling. We lost almost 1.5 million small businesses during the pandemic. We said, and think about this, like internalize it and personalize it, because how many of your neighborhood small businesses that you beloved are closed? And what can we do to be helping them? And next time you go to a small business, whether it's a clothing store or a restaurant or an attorney, or you talk to your accountant, ask them just how their day is. And the thing that they're going to tell you is, I don't have enough time. I'm the chief everything officer. I just need more support and help. And because when I'm spending time doing things like answering the phones, I'm not focusing on delivering the best quality of service in my product. And so how do we balance both? So we spend a lot of time internalizing and sharing stories about our customers, and actually engaging and asking customers to come speak to our employees. I do a lot of fireside chats very similar to this with clients to say, let's talk about what a criminal defense attorney does, because this is a really important job, and boy, is it a hard job. So now let's talk about how we help this attorney, how we help this painter, how we help this roofer, this CPA do the things that they do to support our community. Because if we have a healthy small business economy, we have a healthy community, and everyone gets that. And so it's the internalization of, these are who our customers are. These are the services that they provide. We have almost 13,000 customers, and they're across 32 different segments. So it's not just, we only support attorneys. We're fundamental to giving more value and time back to our customers to really focus on the thing that they left a corporate job for, that they had a passion about, that they were, just had so much energy to say, I want to be my own business owner. And we're supporting that. And so we all internally get so excited about that we love sharing the stories and our clients call us too and just say, can I just tell you how amazing you are? And then we immediately all go on our team's channel and say, I just talked to this client. This is what they said. And isn't this wonderful? Because that real-time feedback also keeps us connected. But we have core values that we actually celebrate every week, and we nominate each other for who represented our core values. So foster happiness, create community, innovate, grow, etc. So we celebrate those core values as being demonstrative to how we support our small businesses. And we celebrate culture and community as well. So we have, if you think about what Ruby does, effectively, we're a call center. But if you think about call centers, most call centers, like when you hear call center, most people's like, oof, that doesn't have a good connotation to it. Because you think, oh, someone's going to put me on hold. They don't care. And we're exactly the opposite, because even the way Ruby operates, we don't schedule our staff to be as on many calls as possible for efficiency. We schedule them to have time in their day and breathing room between calls, because we're being asked to take on our customer's brand. And so we have to be our best person, and we have to be able to embrace where we are at any point in time. So we don't schedule based on efficiency, we schedule for quality. And so it's a very, very different model. And so we even look at things like call center utilization metrics and say, yeah, that's not how we're going to run the business, because that's not what we're doing. We're creating brands. So we even take a look at how our metrics and how we run the business support brand and support culture and support core values.
That's fantastic. So that's one of the things you put attention on, but how do you actually keep it alive in terms of like the communication? So is it through Teams, through email, through Zoom calls? I mean, how do you actually do that?
So all of the above. So we are a Microsoft shop. So we use Teams, and Teams is our biggest community channel. And we also embrace Microsoft Yammer. So with our 800 employees, we encourage them to create their own special interest groups inside of Yammer. So we have groups that are internal artists that are selling, their own goods and wares inside our Yammer channels. We have the Marvel and Star Wars channels of folks that are super excited about the next release of a Marvel or Star Wars movies, and our Cooking with Ruby channel. And the amount of engagement that we have by creating communities of interest, and this is all employee driven. So I don't go say, let's make a Star Wars channel. Everyone's like, I'm obsessed with Star Wars. Is anyone else? And then you'll be 100 people later, like there's 100 of our community members in the Star Wars channel. And so we routinely not only embrace that employee piece, but we actually have a communication strategy. So for instance, we actually have a communications calendar that talks about what are big things going on at the company. How do I keep a regular pulse in touch with everyone so they know where we are and what we're doing and what's coming next and the why behind everything we do. So I have a cadence of communications and I have office hours. So we'll talk about the things that we're doing and say, okay, who wants to come to my office hours and ask me questions, one-on-one or in a group? So folks can come in and talk with me, any member of the executive team, to just say, oh, I really want to know about that. That's really interesting. I didn't know where we actually have an advocacy program. What does that mean? And we do a lot of specific programming as well around all of we call it EDI internally versus DEI, because we think it really should start with equity first, but equity, diversity, and inclusion, and our programming and our training. And we've got cultural celebrations. So we really actually encourage participation from our Rubies. For instance, when it was African American History Month, or now Women's History Month this month, where our Rubies create the content for it, and they share their own personal experiences, because even things like EDI, content's more approachable if you know the person who's delivering the content, because now it's relatable. So we have a lot of content and employee communication channels and programming, and we provide time in the day to engage in them. So that's probably the more important piece. It's one thing to have all this content, but if you don't provide time to actually engage in it, and engage in it at different levels, because all of us have different entry points to the things that we're doing. So our tools, again, Microsoft platform, Teams and Yammer, we use SharePoint. And so we create community sites for everything that we do as well. And we have a lot of virtual events. So we do quarterly all employee updates, and we do a big annual meeting that's virtual, and we create content that is then broken that can be digested over a month. So what is our corporate strategy for this year? And okay, I only have 3 minutes a day if I'm a receptionist. So how do I engage in 3 minutes a day, but just to make sure I know what everyone is doing?
That's fantastic. And, it's a really good point in terms of you create a content, but you also give time to engage.
Yes.
Because otherwise, you can have a channel, but if your culture says it's not okay to go engage in the channel during working hours, then when are you going to engage exactly, right? So if you make it okay, you still expect to produce, but there is time to engage, then it's expected that you engage. And as you said, you are hiring in your hiring process, you're hiring people that are part of your culture, that fit the culture, have the purpose, and embrace the core values. So they're definitely going to want to be engaged because that is who they are. So I think that combination is extremely valuable. So any other advice to other CEOs or business owners out there that are listening to you and probably taking notes? And we're going to write a blog about all of this because this is amazing with all the advice. And what other piece of advice do you have in terms of running your company remotely? Even maybe the leadership. How do you run your leadership team?
Yes, so leadership is another one where with part of remote work, we're really trying to empower more ownership into our people managers, and meaning Ruby, particularly because we were a founder-run company for so long, founders have a tendency to say, and this happens with small businesses as well, that, okay, every dollar is coming out of my pocket, I have to be involved in every decision. And so we've turned that upside down, going, I love it when I'm surprised by something that we've done that I had no idea about. And because it's really about not only the empowerment of our people managers to really take control and ownership of decisions, but enabling things such as communication. So we've embraced and adopted a lot of real-time project management in terms of we use Asana for all of our project management internally, because everything we do is complex and it's never just one person or one department. So how do we create that cross-team collaboration in projects through things like Asana and tools like Teams, where we can get that real-time collaboration going? And then how do we report out on our KPIs and metrics that are showing us whether or not our projects and our commitments to one another are on time? And so what we continue to say, gosh, the more that the executive team isn't in the details, it's creating more opportunities for everyone else to have their growth. But there's another side of that. When you do that, you can't expect perfection, because, and this is probably the hardest transition for an entrepreneur or a founder or a CEO of a small business to say, going, what happens if something's wrong? And so we've also embraced very much you know what? Make a decision with the best information in front of you. And if we need to adapt, we adapt. And it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, but it's constant iteration. And so let's not take too much time to think through every possible option. Make your best guess right now based on the information in front of you. And if we're a little bit off, we'll adapt and we'll learn, and we'll adapt and we'll learn. So we've become a very quick decision-making, very innovative organization as a result, because we've empowered everyone to make hard decisions, and we've empowered them to get a couple things wrong too. It's okay to get things wrong. And it's really kind of, as a leadership team, we spend more time helping them really embrace what are the inputs and what is the data telling me. And yes, that's a great decision. Go ahead and execute. And if you run into any problems, I'm here to remove roadblocks. My job as a manager is here to remove roadblocks. And so it's a very different operating model than what used to be, let's do a 2-year strategic plan or a 3-year strategic plan and then break it up into pieces. And largely because the world changes every day and we need to be more nimble and we need to be more flexible. So we kind of focus on what do we have to do today, and maybe what do we need to do in the next 3 months, and that's it. So we don't think too much about what do we need to be doing in 12 months, because that you'll be surprised by the time you reflect back, going, oh, there was a bunch of new stuff that came up that we didn't expect.
For sure. And I think really having a strong mission and a strong vision and a strong core values, that doesn't change. What you are changing is basically the plan on how you're going to execute that mission, how you're going to work on that vision, how you're going to embody those core values. And those remain the same. And that's the stability for the employees as well, knowing this is who we are. But how we're going to do that, we have to totally be able to change according to what is happening. So we basically adjust things around us so that we use it for our advantage to still communicate and being able to service our customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I agree with you completely that it comes back to having that strong vision, mission, purpose, and core values, because that is your North Star that always keeps everything in alignment, because we all know what we're here to do and we all know what we're here to service, and how we get there can be flexible and fluid.
Right. And I think it's part of it is also the accountability. And again, you talked about hiring the right people, etc. But any other points or advice in terms of like how to actually manage accountability in a virtual or remote environment?
So we invested heavily in data and analytics, and probably within my first month at Ruby, I said, so where are the company KPIs? And everyone kind of said, what's a KPI? I'm like, okay, well, how do we know that the decisions that we're making every day turned out to be the right decisions? And is there data that we're looking at to tell us, ooh, here's a forward-looking indicator that there might be a problem coming? So we had to take time and establish those and say, okay, we're going to start consistently measuring data and we're going to look for patterns. And we spent a lot of time. It took almost an entire year to collect a series of data and educate one another about, okay, so what are our receptionist KPIs? How do we know that we're delivering the best quality? And when there's a spike, what happened in that spike? Let's talk about what caused that spike. Let's talk about causation versus correlation. It just happened to be, it was November and it was Thanksgiving, or there was a hurricane, or who knows what, again, causation versus correlation. And so that first year of collecting data and spending the time to educate one another about not only what our departments do, but really how connected every one of those KPIs are across the business that really project the overall health and well-being of the business. And very, very quickly, we shifted that to, okay, so now that we understand what our KPIs are of things that have already happened, now what are the forward-looking indicators that are telling us when there's a problem coming? And so how do we start then building plans that have KPI-based goals and targets to them? So how am I going to improve service quality and decrease our average speed of answer? Because the faster we answer the call, the more opportunities we catch for our customers. And so how do we, I'm going to make a goal and a target to bring down our average speed of answer. How are we going to get there? So how do we then use future KPIs to drive our plans and our visions? Because that has an outcome that's meaningful to a customer. And so we spent a lot of time just collecting KPIs, learning about them, understanding how they drive the business, and then setting our goals and targets to future goals, and then measuring our success along the way.
Makes total sense. I am a big fan of using KPIs, scorecards, data, analyzing it. And, and I'm going to also add, in terms of one of the things that I've seen that is very successful for businesses, of course, virtual and not virtual, in a remote, working remotely or not, is having those well-documented processes and procedures, because then you can use the KPIs to actually and tie those together, the scorecards and the processes, because the scorecards, the KPIs, are going to measure how well those processes are being executed.
Right. And it's really interesting once you explain even what are the KPIs, but how sensitive are the KPIs? And just a funny Portland example is the weather's starting to get really good in Portland, and we're starting to see absenteeism pop up on days where it's 78 and sunny. And we're like, okay, but if we have 30 people do that on the same day, let's talk about the sensitivity of that brings down our average speed to answer. And now we're not meeting our purpose to our customers. And then everyone goes, oh, I get it. Okay, so I shouldn't do that. And here's why. And I understand the impact, because it's one thing if it happens occasionally, but if you all of a sudden create patterns without the causation or understanding sensitivity, it can also have an impact.
For sure. And again, it goes I just, to your point, in terms of the culture, because you can only bring that data to employees that actually share your purpose.
Correct.
And understand the vision and have the core values, because otherwise go, okay, well, it was a beautiful day, I just don't want to show up for work. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that I love it that you're using those KPIs, showing to the team, and as a group, seeing the causation and what they can do, how each person is actually responsible for the final outcome.
Absolutely. And it just comes back, and it's almost the same premise as voting. Like, if you don't do it, or you do it and you collectively do it, and you as a group, you commit to a goal and a purpose, it's amazing that you can drive impact and you can drive change.
Absolutely. Okay, that has been an amazing episode with so much great information. We didn't even think about we're going to talk about virtual. We were going to talk about culture and different things, but I think this is so important, because it's really important for businesses that are right now considering going back in person or staying remote, and how can we make it work, how we can still emulate and take the systems that we had before, and how do we make them remote and virtual, which is I think it's a very relevant topic. So I'm so happy we actually got to talk about it.
Oh, thank you.
And are you moving to Portland?
So at this point, because we still don't have offices open, we've kind of said we'll wait until the fall and reassess to say, because if we were to move to Portland and say there's 12 people in the office, I'm not sure that's going to necessarily be helpful and might cause more chaos than help. But if we do find that our employee population says, okay, I kind of do miss being in the office and I like that predictability, then I probably will.
Okay, good to know. All right. So again, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
My pleasure. Yeah. And thank you for being a Ruby customer and all of your amazing referrals.
You are very welcome.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.